Welcome to the Universal Dancer Podcast with your host Leslie Zare, author of The Alchemy of Dance and the Alchemia Remedies. Coming to you live from Cairo, Egypt, the ancient land of Chem. Journey with us to explore sacred dance, the sacred arts, the mystical and the magical. Join a community of like-minded souls seeking to understand the cosmic dance of co-creation through the sacred arts. Come along and expand your mind, ignite your creativity, and explore something new and something old. Welcome to the podcast. So I'm very excited to get into this show. We have a wonderful guest for you, Mary Abrams. And thank you for those who are joining live. And for those of you who are watching the replay, I'm glad you're here. And please leave comments and questions. Those of you who are here live can type into the chat if you have any questions. And like and subscribe. You'll be notified if you click that little bell when we go live again. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to my guest. Mary Abrams teaches in New York City and internationally. Her 27 years of professional service includes working with psychotherapists, social workers, political activists and leaders, artists, actors, healthcare providers, business leaders, and educators, among others. Her love for working with people is informed by her master's degree in consciousness studies, focusing on embodied movement, the biology of emotion, epistemics, and over 25 years of exploring and teaching somatic movement practice inspired by dance, creativity, and healing. Her primary influences include Emil Conrad, Susan Harper, Gary David, Corrine McHose, Kevin Frank, Susan Bauer, Tony Sustek, Sylvan Tompkins, the open fields and skies of Iowa and the USA, the wild currents of the East River in New York City, all movements of her students and clients for the last 27 years. Mary owns and directs Moving Body Resources, a space in New York City for teachers and practitioners supporting body awareness, wellness, and authenticity in life. She taught from 2007 until 2020 on the graduate course Masters in Dance and Somatic Well-Being of the University of Central Lancashire in the UK and USA, and currently teaches on the Continuum training at the Somatische Academy, Berlin, Germany. Mary is honored to have served on the boards of directors of the Minnesota Dance Alliance, Dance Space Project at St. Mark's Church in New York City, the International Somatic Movement Education and Therapy Association, and the Tompkins Institute. Let's welcome Mary to the show. Hi, Mary. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Leslie. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Well, let's just jump right in. And I always like to go backward before I go forward. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about how you first started dancing. Where did your dance journey begin?
Okay, thank you for that question. As I feel my way into answering it, I'm just going to name that I've got this sort of kind of jiggly vibration of excitement to be here with you and for this conversation and for all who are present right now and who are all present in the replay of listening. I grew up in a town called Mason City, Iowa. It's in the middle of the United States. It's a town of about 30,000 people, so it's pretty small in a otherwise rural region. Actually, it was the big town in the very rural region. And I started dancing because our next door neighbor, who was 18 years old at the time and had taken dance lessons locally mostly, she started teaching. And my mom asked me if I wanted to take dance lessons. And I said, sure. And so this whole journey began. Some of my strongest memories from those early dance days were skipping around a furnace in my teacher's basement. And the blessing of her as my teacher, her name was Lucy Bruner, and it was Lucy's dance studio. She really loved the kids. She loved dancing and she loved teaching. And so she really supported us to experience ourselves in the joy of moving together. And as much as all sort of learning environments can become competitive in a certain way, she never really played on that with the students. She really encouraged everybody, no matter how good they were, to just keep finding a way for themselves to keep enjoying moving. And so I continued to dance from the time I was 6 years old until I graduated from high school, and then inspired by a friend of mine who was a year ahead of me, who had gone to the University of Iowa to study dance. In their program, I thought, maybe I could go to college and dance. But instead of a big university, I wanted to go to a smaller school, and I was accepted into a small liberal arts school in southern Minnesota called St. Olaf College. And my teachers, Susan Bauer and Tony Sostek, who were named in my bio, they were my key supports, inspirations, and inspirers at that time. And then I was exposed to dance on a whole different spectrum of creativity and aesthetic and thought, because I didn't even know what modern dance was until I went to St. Olaf College. In fact, I saw it in the catalog and I went, oh, that looks interesting. But I was exposed to different kinds of what we now call somatic movement practices, body-mind centering, Laban, Bartini of movement fundamentals. I was also exposed to kind of every kind of modern dance, contact improv as well. And so then I pursued finishing my degree as a dance major. And during my senior year, I spent a year teaching creative dance to kids and modern dance in southern India at an international school, where I was then also starting to be exposed to Bharatanatyam and other kinds of, Indian dance. And a really important thing to mention about my time in college was Susan Bauer, my teacher and faculty advisor. She had done her degree, her master's degree, focused on sacred dance in the Christian church. And so part of my experience as a dance major and a member of the St. Olaf Dance Company at the time was we did these lecture demonstrations, and also we participated in church services that were basically, the dance was the primary activity in the church service. And so there were different kinds of dances based on the history of dance in the Christian church that she had sort of researched and recreated for us in repertory. And then she had also choreographed a sermon based on the Chichester Psalms that was basically a solo dance sermon for the services. So we did tours of southern Minnesota. We even toured Iowa. We even did this out here in New York on Staten Island when I came out with the dance interim. So it was really, really important for me growing up as a Lutheran Christian person in the culture that I grew up in and then St. Olaf being a Lutheran Christian, I'm going to say inspired institution, to have an understanding of the significance of dance in this Christian tradition. And then because of Susan and all her depth of research and multicultural perspective, she helped me to start to understand the greater historical significance of dance in this way. And so moving on from then St. Olaf, I continued to dance. I moved to Minneapolis and continued to dance there for 3.5 years, worked with a number of choreographers in Minneapolis that I still adore to this day. Lori Van Weeren and Georgia Stevens being the kind of two primary ones. I also did some of my own work there. And then after about 3 years or so, I just wanted to go live in a more culturally dense, intense environment. And I could only speak English. And so I decided it was New York. for a variety of reasons. One, I had been to New York, so I knew I had a taste of what I might be getting myself into. And that was 34 years ago that I moved to New York. And I focused on dance really intensively as a professional path in what we would call the downtown dance world of New York. So it was always more on the contemporary, creative, avant-garde side of things, very exploratory, a lot of improvisational play and discovery. And in the years of doing that, one of my ballet teachers actually, who was a body worker, became a rolfer or a structural integrator. Her name was Cynthia Babbitt. She introduced me to the work of Emily Conrad and Continuum. And I really didn't know what she was telling me about, other than she just kept saying it's cellular movement, and I think you'll find it really interesting. And because I could feel the resonance of this way of exploring movement in Cynthia, I just followed my instincts and said yes. And so that was in 1994, my first experience with Emily Conrad here in New York City. And I felt like at that time in my own body, I had focused so much on dance as a sort of career path that I was starting to lose my sense of connection with my body in a deeper way, and the joy of just learning through movement, which was always what inspired me. Kind of winding back, I'm a small person, and as a kid, I often felt quite physically overwhelmed by a lot of the things going on around me. And I'm very, looking back and forward, I'm very sure that at this time in my life, dance lessons saved me. They gave me a sense of my body right here, right now, in real time and space. It also gave me a context for the intensity of my emotionality to be moving. And it was, at least in my family and the culture around me, that context of taking dance lessons and doing dances at nursing homes and as part of school performances and then recitals every year, that context was okay for me to be big, to be out there, to have a lot of intense expression and the joy of expression. And I needed all of that. I needed a context in which I was supported for that. So, but as I focused on dance more and more and more as a career path, and the purpose of it started to change, I started losing that sense of a deeper connection, that kind of, I would say, more sacred spiritual experience of dance that was really what inspired me to be dancing in the first place and to keep dancing. So when I met Emily and started exploring Continuum and what's also known as Continuum movement, I began to feel like, I'm back home again. I'm coming home. And it just, especially those first couple of years, I just felt like I was just coming home again and again and again, and deeper and deeper and deeper. And 27 years later, it's still pretty much the same. I'm still coming home. It's still getting deeper. I had the great privilege to explore and learn with Emily in workshops, in classes for 20 years until she passed away in 2014. I also had and continue to have the great honor to work and learn from Susan Harper, who's a really important associate and I would say co-founder in certain senses, or definitely developer, really important in the development of Continuum. And Gary David, who was Emily's husband for 23 years, he's been really important in my learning and understanding of the epistemics work and the affect theory, and how the biology of emotion is moving us and moving through us, and what it's what trying to help serve for our well-being. And like I also in my bio, I named Karen McCose and Kevin Frank as really important journeyers and learners of my life in these last 10 years or more. And there's many others I could name, but all of that just kind of led me to how, where I'm still exploring now.
Well, I think it's interesting, like collecting all those pieces and then it all comes together in you somehow. So, yes. And finding that balance, I think, between work and being an artist is not easy. You can lose yourself when you need to be in a competitive environment. Then I think sometimes the joy also gets lost.
Yeah.
But if you can find a way to bring that together, which it sounds like you have. But what did you, when you started, what type of dance when you were in Iowa, when you first started, you were doing ballet or contemporary or what? Where
Well,
did you start on this
it was
journey?
it was tap, jazz, and ballet, and not necessarily
Okay.
in that order. And we did it all in half an hour, at least the tap and the ballet part at first. Jazz came in when I got a little bit older. And I did point work in high school. But again, this was not a super high, like rigid technical training. It was good enough. I didn't
But it
hurt
gave you a
myself.
background. Yeah, and it gives you an outlet. I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned that, and I think that's one of the most important things that if all children could take some kind of dance just as an outlet and to
Mhm.
be embodied. They want to do that. They want to dance, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess it doesn't need to be a class, but
Yeah.
some form of dance.
Yeah, to be in an environment that encourages them to move and feel themselves moving and feel the joy of that, and um, and how that helps them feel more alive and more at ease in themselves and safe. Like it has, the safety factor is really big in terms of some kids are really struggling inside their own bodies, and to have a safe place to both kind of struggle with that, but also find the way they want to be moving,
Yeah.
and that it has meaning and a way and importance in this greater world of being is really, really important. Yeah.
And
And
imagine getting those skills early on, because I think, if you can learn how to do that, and as you said, to be able to express your emotions and to be
Mhm,
able to get them out, if children could learn that just as a skill to develop to
mhm,
help them cope with life as they go along, I think.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that was common probably, at least when I grew up, it was common that you went and took dance classes. I don't know what's common now. I've been out of the world for a long time. But and I wasn't doing it to relieve stress or any of those things. I was just doing it to learn something new. But I think
Mhm,
as we look back, there's definitely a lot that can be done, especially if it's non-competitive and just
right.
be able to express
Yeah, yeah,
what's coming up.
yeah.
So you went into modern when you went to university then or college, you
Mhm,
were then doing modern dance.
mhm.
And you said that's where you first encountered these like continuum, or that was later? That was later when you went to New York.
Continuum was later when I went to New York, but I first encountered somatic movement practices, which Continuum is in the kind of sort of umbrella field of,
Uh-huh.
like Alexander technique, Feldenkrais, body mind centering. There's many different names of programs that kind of fall into this umbrella of what we call somatic movement. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that for a few minutes, and maybe you can just mention a few of them and kind of explain what they are, or even the things, the highlights, like what perhaps you extracted from each one of those different types of movements. Because I think we have listeners from all different
Mhm.
areas and levels. So I think it's nice to go into these and explain what they are. And for me too, because I haven't
Mhm.
experienced all of these things. I left I
Yeah.
left the Western world a long time ago
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
missed all of that. So it's interesting for me as well to hear more about each one of these things.
Uh-huh. So I'll just start by speaking to, there is an organization called the International Somatic Movement Education and Therapy Association. They have a number of what they call approved training programs. And so people who really want more information, I highly recommend you go to the ismeta.org website. And there's all kinds of information you can start to gather from there. The somatic movement practices that have been, I would say, most directly influencing me are, like I mentioned, Continuum, body mind centering, and the work of Kevin Frank and Karen McCose, which includes Rolf movement explorations and gravity, space, perceptual work in Karen McCose's evolutionary practice. But she's also been influenced by Continuum and body mind centering and cranial sacral therapy and somatic experiencing, and there's lists, right? So I'll start with Continuum in the sense that Continuum is a movement inquiry into what do we discover about ourselves as human beings when we recognize that we're a fluid system. We're primarily made up of water, about 70 to 80% water, and all the dynamics within our body, all of our body structures are basically fluid in their dynamic. The cellular system is a fluid system. And so each, we're however many cells that we are, and all of those are a little body of water with a membrane that allows movement or information to come in and to go out, right? So if we start to wake that up in our consciousness, what do we discover? And so in Continuum, we wake it up by exploring with breath and sound and movements that tend to be more nonlinear, non-repetitive in the usual sense of, do 5 reps this way and that way and this way and that way, right? So the movement, literally expresses the more kind of undulating, nonlinear ways of being, which many other dance forms and expressions have also explored these movements in their different ways. So in Continuum, like I said, we do this with breath, sound, and movement, and then we just keep inquiring, what am I noticing? What am I noticing now? What's waking up in my awareness? What's dissolving? What's becoming present? What's becoming absent? So that's a real sort of concise as I can be description of Continuum. Body mind centering. Most of my direct experience with actually exploring body mind centering with teachers was back when I lived in Minneapolis. There were a number of fabulous people, both coming from the East Coast to teach there, but also who lived there, who had been exploring deeply with Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen and other teachers. A woman named Diane Elliott, a woman named Suzanne River were kind of my 2 primary influences there. But I was also introduced to the work of Elaine Summer and release technique, and also started doing a lot of contact improvisation. So body mind centering is focused on experiential anatomy. So what is it when we learn the specifics of an anatomical system, and then begin to explore the qualities of that system, the dynamics of the movement of that system. How does that come alive in our experience? What do we learn about our anatomy when we're actually moving, sensing, feeling, moving with the anatomy, instead of just looking at it from a textbook orientation and kind of processing it on a higher order intellectual level? So Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen has explored this in many, 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 many dimensions over the last, I don't know how many years she's been gifting her presence and incredible work to so many people who keep gifting it onwards. And she's also gone into embryology and, not just our actual immediate physical bodies, but the bodies, you could say, we had in the process of becoming a full-grown body. I was also experienced the Laban movement analysis and Bartinian movement fundamentals largely when I was in college, and I've done a little bit here and there over the years. And that's an early system of trying to understand the different shapes, qualities, rhythms, textures of movement from a kind of looking at it from the outside and understanding all those dynamics. And then the Bartinian movement fundamentals being more like, what are some of those inner movement fundamentals that we develop? And how can, if we revisit those movement patterns, what do we begin to discover about our own movement patterns and how they can reorganize? And then I'm trying to so I barely had tastes of things like Alexander technique and Feldenkrais technique. I've just had bits here and there. They largely focus on what's called psychophysical reeducation and also the kind of neurological repatterning of our, what I would call our pre-movement impulses. Those are both largely what they both focus on, and they each have their own kind of system of ways to enter into that. So that's kind of a brief and general overview. I've been influenced by a lot of the writing that's come out of these different aspects of somatic movement, and a lot of that was important for me when I was teaching on the master's degree course at the University of Central Lancashire. It was called the Masters in Dance and Somatic Wellbeing, because this course was an overview of the world of somatic movement, especially in the relationship to somatic movement education, learning, teaching, supporting people to learn from within their own bodies of experience. And so I started doing a lot more reading of different authors who've written from all kinds of different perspectives, including the authentic movement work. And again, that's another thing I forgot to mention, that I have had the great opportunity to experience and work with some quite profound authentic movement facilitator teachers. And so being inspired by the different writings of people has also helped guide and support me in how I teach, ways I offer sort of context to students for supporting the inspiration of their own kind of movement from within, and how they move in the world and how they dance in the world in connection with themselves and everything.
And what you're teaching now, is that's kind of a hybrid of all the stuff that you've brought together, or it's one specific form? I mean, I see that they all overlap, but
yeah. You know, it because I have immersed myself in Continuum so intensively, that definitely is kind of the biggest influence in the way that I teach, because I'm always teaching through inquiry. Some of these systems, they can awaken inquiry. They're not always about inquiry in the same way that Continuum is definitely always about inquiry for me. But they all have so much rich information and perspective to offer that, yeah, as I continue to grow as a teacher and integrate my different kinds of experience, they come out of my teaching in different ways. And especially the way I have explored and integrated, or continuing to explore and integrate the work of Epistemics and J. Samuel Bois and Gary David, as well as the work of Sylvan Tompkins and affect script theory, which, again, those are not exactly practices. Those are things you start to explore and bring into the learning of life through, and for me, especially through movement. Like, there's plenty of people who know those theories and work with them on psychological and clinical and whatever ways, but I experience them all as movement. And how is it that we can deepen our own experience of well-being and how we're dancing together on this planet if we have some language and a way to explore the biology of emotion, how that's motivating us in our lives. And yeah.
So what exactly are affect theory and epistemics?
So I'm going to start with epistemics. This is a it's basically a working model for how as human beings we create meaning, how it is that you could say levels at which we are thinking, creating thought, and having meaning in our experience. And part of the reason why the work of J. Samuel Bois and Gary David, Bois was David's mentor, which also stems from the work of Alfred Korzybski in general semantics, which comes from the School of Phenomenology. In case for those people who are interested in philosophy, it's kind of all in that sort of lineage. But the important thing about it was Korzybski in general semantics began to recognize that the silent level, meaning all of those activities that are going on that don't require words to be what they are, those are they're a way in which we as human beings are always in a process of meaning. So, for instance, my physical body is making meaning all the time without any words going on, like those silent level movements. And I'm going to sort of make a slight tangent. And that's why dance is so important, because dance is a direct expression of silent level meaning. It doesn't require words to be what it is. We could say that's kind of our lowest level of meaning making. And when I say low, I don't mean diminished. I mean low in the spectrum of higher order cognitive activity. So at this silent level, there's more movement going on than at any other experience of meaning that we have. And all of this is coming out of the entirety of everything going on all at once at any moment in time in this universe and every universe. So from that, a human body is created, and this is an expression of meaning. Okay, because we have the kind of nervous system we have, then the next level of meaning for us is descriptive. So out of all of these silent level activities, we create some kind of recognition for these qualities, shapes, textures, movement, rhythms, and we begin to create a way of representing that back to ourselves with what we could call descriptive experience. So words like fast, slow, soft, smooth, hard, jittery, speedy, jiggly, right? Gooey. So all of those words are more descriptive, and that's closer to the silent level, right? But it's still slightly removed. It's like slightly abstracted out of it. So then we have another next level, which would be interpretive. So we start to take all of those awarenesses of the qualities, the descriptions, and we interpret them. Soft is easy. Soft is nice. Soft is fill in the blank, whatever soft is. Hard is difficult. Hard is solid. Hard is supportive. Who knows? It could be anything. So you can feel for how each level starts to kind of abstract out of the next, meaning it's all still there, but it's just kind of moving up and leaving out what's the whole brand of the experience, so to speak. So from interpretive, we go to judgment and conclusion levels, where, for me, judgment is about creating a this or a that. It's right or it's wrong. It's black or it's white. It's good or it's bad. It's this or it's that, whatever it is. There's kind of a dividing line, and you put something over in here, or you put it over here or here, right? And then we create a conclusion. So now we're kind of going even higher. So if soft is easy and nut and good, then my conclusion could be I've got to feel soft all the time. And now I go about life trying to be soft all the time, right? Or if it's hard, and hard is difficult, and difficult is bad. Well, now I have to avoid feeling anything hard all the time, which every conclusion is limited at some point. So important thing isn't that we're making conclusions. The important thing is that we recognize how they're working, if they're working well, or if they've reached their limit, and how do we keep questioning it. And this, I'm giving a very simple description of a very complex way of which we're always making meaning, in a sense, moving with meaning, and how it applies to our whole existence at an institutional level, at government levels, at interdynamic levels, and also deeply personal. So epistemics, this is just one of the aspects of the model within epistemics in which we can start to explore how it is that we create meaning, and in a sense, where am I oriented in my own meaning-making process? And if I'm stuck mentally, excuse me, say in a judgment conclusion level, it might be of service if I try to slow myself down, actually start to feel my body, feel the quality is moving in my body, let them do what they're trying to do, and help me sort of reorient in that process of meaning making. Because at that silent level, I have so many more movement options for what the meaning can become at the higher order than what I'm already familiar with. So that's a really, again, simplified but complex expression of this of the model within epistemics and the significance of moving with meaning.
And when you do this,
pause there.
Okay. Yes, take some water. When you do this, so how do you incorporate this into movement? Are you suggesting things as people move, or what's the process of this?
Well, some of it is, it helps me when I'm experiencing people and how they're speaking from their movement experience. It helps me to understand where they're oriented and gives me an opportunity to inquire with them and invite them. Because some people, whatever it is at an interpretive level, they're very much staying there, but you can sense and feel that there's something else going on deeper down that they're so present with, but they're just not aware of it. So in a way, I can begin to participate with them by offering them the inquiry. So tell me what you notice in your body. When you're feeling love, tell me what you notice in your body, right? Or when you are so angry about X, Y, and Z, tell me what you notice in your body. So they actually start to feel the movement going on in their body. And that movement then might become expressing, more in a macro sense, or they might start to feel the deeper inner micro movements of those experiences, and let that continue through them, however it's there to be of service ultimately to their well-being and their connection to just being alive. So,
and you're doing this with individuals, or you're doing this like in a group setting?
It's a both and. It's just always present. I also have a class that I call All About Attention that I teach usually on most Fridays every month. And this is where I'm really focusing on, you could say, the details of ways of inquiring this way. When I'm teaching my Moving Body Innovations class, which is really a primarily continuum-oriented and inspired class, I work with it in more general ways, and then also sometimes it comes out specifically depending on who shares what in the class and how it comes through, or maybe something I'm working with within myself. But it's a great model. It can be a great model and language for people to help them understand or get a way of landing with how am I orienting. And if I'm feeling stuck somewhere, what might give me support if I shift my orientation a little bit from the interpretive judgment conclusion level down to more of a descriptive silent level experience. And then also what happens if I'm so good at the silent level experience, but then I jump right to the next level and I skip all these other ones. If I start to develop my sense of my ability to describe my experience, my recognition of various interpretations that come through, what happens when I start to kind of fill in more of those movements in my experience? And when for me, it's like whatever words or thoughts or images are coming, they're all just expressions of movement. So we start to feel more for all the unique intricacies of that.
And you're talking to them while they're doing movement, or you're suggesting things while they're
most of the time
moving?
I'm not talking. I'm mostly just listening, feeling, and being present with them, as well as moving in different ways. And then I do ask questions periodically and invite them sometimes to pause or to slow down or to stay with something. And in that sense, I really, in my own experience, I come from having a real value for all movement is here to be of service to our well-being. And we've learned how to inhibit a lot of that movement. We have also learned to make some of those movements more than they need to be over and over and over again. So as soon as I feel a certain kind of movement going on in my body, I just repeat it over and over and over and over and over again. And that might have been great the first 5 times or the first 10 times, but the 11th time, it's like, now I'm just stuck in this and I don't know how to get out of it, right? So I invite people to feel for, well, how much of that is really enough? And what begins to happen when it finishes? What new movement is present, and what is that showing up in service for? And so whether I use this exact language or not when I'm teaching or working with people, or whether it's always there on the implicate order, this value for all movements are important. And what happens if we decrease the inhibitors of those we've inhibited too much, and what happens if we invite those that we've become a little bit too attached to pause or to find their finish, to be just as big as they need to be, but no bigger. And this, in a way, is where some of the affect play starts, the language of affect starts to come into how I'm speaking.
And what are the movements like that you're doing? Is it like free movement, or you're suggesting to people that they do specific types of movement, or?
In general, it's free movement. And when I'm teaching in certain ways, I'll also, like in a continuum class, or the Moving Body Innovations, as my continuum classes are called, as I'm creating what we call a sequence of breath, sound, and movement, and there might be times when I'm inviting people to do some breath sound with, say, their hands on the front of their body, and then we start to, guide them into, say, a head tail coming together and releasing. So beginning with that movement. And then there might be a time where I cue them to start to play with their fingers and toes as tiny tentacles. And then at some point after cueing those things in, it's just like, okay, now just let your body go wherever your body needs to move. Just as big or just as small as it wants to move. So there's a kind of a both and. There's cueing to, sometimes we all need a little bit of sort of, here's a portal you can walk through or enter through to start to experience your body in a different way than you might otherwise. So it's both. I give some cueing, and then there's always time for just the movement as it's showing up to unfold.
And then people process afterwards, or it's just through the inquiry while they're moving that they come to realizations? Or
It's always a both and for people, and it depends too. Some people uh, uh, just kind of get flooded while they're in it, and so when they bring it to a rest, they'll process either through verbal exchange or journaling or something. Um, but there's always a time in my classes where I give people an opportunity to speak if they have words that help them sort of uh, finish moving their process or express the meaning of some of the things that are coming up for them. Yeah. And then in other classes, sometimes the process is kind of a little more incremental, like there's a little more words throughout the whole expression, but there's always time and space for feeling in, for letting movement happen. It's just a little more incremental instead of like in my moving body innovations classes, there's long time of self-exploration before we do some verbal check-in.
And what do you feel personally? What have you benefited from doing this work? How has it affected you?
Well, I mentioned earlier this sense of coming home. I feel like I keep being given this incredible blessing of coming home to what it is to be alive in a breathing, moving, living body. A sense of support for moving through what's really challenging about life, both physically and on every other level, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, relationally. Um, and also just a great sense of well-being and resource that and what supports me to be alive in the immediacy of every moment. And in that sense, I feel like my experience of what it means to be dancing just keeps getting more and more rich all the time. So people used to say, so are you still dancing? And I always thought that was kind of a funny question. I'm like, well, did I ever stop? It just keeps it keeps transforming the meaning. Like here's that, levels of abstraction. The meaning of what it means to be dancing just keeps growing in so many different ways. And this sense of spirituality or sacredness, the sacredness of what it is to be alive every moment, the preciousness of being alive right now, whether I'm happy about it or not, this is precious. And a sense of greater connectivity to all the things that I can see and feel and experience, and all those things that are intangible, in this universe and beyond this universe. I just feel like it keeps giving me more and more of a sense of being present with all of that, and an appreciation for all that is.
And you've been doing this a long time. I think that's a big takeaway here. I think that as people are asking you, oh, you're still dancing. Well, there is no end. I think it goes deeper and deeper and deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, the more you do it, the more you do go to these deeper levels, or I guess for me, it's all about the sacredness. And I don't think you reach that in a minute. You reach that over years and years of doing a practice that may be the same practice, but with this repetition, not necessarily exactly the same thing, but there is a familiarity with that. And then that allows you to go deeper. I think if you kind of know what the process is, then do it again and do it again. I think about people like doing Tai Chi. It's the same form, but they're doing it over and over and over again. And I think that's how you reach these different levels, because it allows you to become sensitive or to notice different things. So I think that doing this over time and that really does create some kind of depth of experience.
Yeah. I think of it, well, this is the way I orient to what I'm going to call the structure of practices. Even if you're, say, following a familiar sequence of movements, say like Tai Chi or other practices that might have, as you continue to experience yourself in that sequence, that structure over time, this the structure becomes more like a membrane than a repetitive thing. So that the elements of the practice hold you in a certain way, so that you can harness the experience, that it just doesn't become like, oh, I go over here, do this, do that, and it's just everywhere all the time. You have a sense of of what's containing the practice, and then you also have a sense, like membranes are permeable, so you have a sense of how the you can say the sequence of the practice is informed by what comes in, and also how the experience of the practice from within that membrane begins to seep out and inform what's happening around you. So that even if I'm dedicated to one specific kind of practice for 30 or 40 years, or an entire lifetime, whether it's, there's all kinds of names for practices, you become alive in the practice. And so what's living inside the practice becomes more important than whether I follow the steps exactly.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful explanation. Yes. Well, segue on from that, speaking of containers, I would like to, to talk about your place, your sacred space that you have, the Moving Body Resources in New York City. Tell us a little bit about that, how that came to be, and where it is now.
Mm. Well, thank you, Leslie. I appreciate you being interested in that and asking. At the moment, I'm in my living room on what's called the Lower East Side of Manhattan, which has become sort of my home studio during the COVID time. And it's also Sunday morning here, so that's part of the reason why I'm at home. But the space that is Moving Body Resources at this time, we've been in for 16 years. It's in the middle of Manhattan on West 27th Street, near Madison, just south of Madison Square Garden, for people who know Manhattan. And it's an amazing space. It really has a life of its own that calls me out of my tendencies to also like to be very in and not necessarily disconnected, but alone a lot.
I understand that.
It calls me to be of service, and I'm grateful for that, because there's a tremendous community of people who really find Moving Body Resources as their space to offer their gifts to the world, whether they're doing private practice as a massage therapist, an acupuncturist, all kinds of healing arts, even psychotherapists work there sometimes, or whether you're a teacher of class or kind of workshop or training. Dunya, who you had on, you interviewed not too long ago, she has offered her workshops at my space many years, and others like her who do meditation or yoga or other kinds of body work therapy trainings, energy healing trainings, things like that. So and also some dancers who rent periodically. All of them are dancing in a certain way in my mind, but it's become this kind of organic, I'm going to call it a human arts community of body wellness and learning from within, and moving, breathing and moving. So the space functions primarily as a rental space. I don't hire people to do their work. They are self-motivated, self-employed, self-inspired, and they're looking for a space, so they find Moving Body Resources to come teach there. I also, of course, use the space for my own sacred teaching practice, which I feel very blessed to be able to do. my need for space came out of my need to keep moving and to start teaching when I became originally an authorized continuum movement teacher when Emily was still alive. I was among some of the first people authorized as continuum teachers. I was also sponsoring Emily to teach in New York at that time, along with Susan Harper and Gary David, and I would co-teach workshops together. So I needed a space for all of that. And after renting bigger spaces over the years, the space we're in now became a home for all of that. You can see pictures of it on the website, but it's the whole floor of a small building. It's about 3,200 square feet of our usable space. So we have a large movement studio for anywhere from like 30 to 50 people, depending on what they're doing. A small movement studio for smaller groups, and then 3 small offices for the private practice work, an administrative office, a lobby, a kitchen, 2 bathrooms, So it's a really beautiful space with brick walls and a nice wooden floor, some wooden beams. The building's over 100 years old, so it's got this kind of nice earthy quality in the middle of Manhattan. And we're on the 4th floor, so we're sort of in the middle of this small building. And I can't tell you how many times people come in and say, I can't believe this space is here right in the middle of New York City, and how wonderful it is to hear that. I don't feel like it's just me. It's everybody who comes there who blesses the space with the kind of work that they do that helps to create it. And so, throughout the pandemic, it's been really, really difficult. We were empty, like besides me and my partner who shares my office space and the person who used to work for me. We were the only people there for basically a year and a half until I had to let my employee go. But a very trickling, presence started to happen. And then by June, July of 2021, more of the renters were able to start to come back. It was a combination of, first it was government mandates, blah, 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 everything had to shut down. But then it was, people feeling safe. It's still a huge question. How safe am I given all the unknowns? But, different things have happened over time. People starting to feel more safe. People just starting to need to get themselves moving in different ways again. So it's picking up. It's still, I don't really expect it to ever be what it was. I'm looking forward to what it's becoming. And the joy of sticking it out, both through crowdfunding and government funding, and me just basically volunteering my time now to keep it going, is that every person who still comes in the door is so glad this space exists, and so glad it's still there for those who maybe haven't been around in a long time. And that's hugely meaningful. So I'm so grateful.
And I think these are, we were discussing this a little bit before we started. These spaces are really important, and I don't think that people appreciate it. I think everyone thinks these are businesses and they are businesses in one sense, but to really hold space for other people and to create that, because it's really you that creates the energy of the space. Even if other people are coming in and using it, it's you that holds it together. And I think I really appreciate that. I've run a center, so I know what it's like to do that. But I'm not sure other people really realize that there is something about that person that holds it all together, and that is a big, holding a sacred space is a big responsibility, and it's beautiful work, but it isn't easy. And you did, I guess it's like being a mother, you're holding, you've got this womb. That's what I always felt, that this was a womb that I was kind of holding for growth for other people to grow and expand. And I'm sure in New York City it's even more difficult than in Cairo. But that business model, if you want to call it that, I think is so important to hold that space and then allow other people to come in and do their good work there. So I wish you a lot of luck. I hope that it will continue to flourish and come back to something that is more manageable as we move. I mean, it's also going to be interesting to see how it evolves. You've been through a stressful period, but hopefully I would think that it would just come in a new way and create something different perhaps, but maybe something even more beautiful than it was.
Yeah. Thank you, Leslie. I'm so really touched and appreciating using the metaphor of being a womb space and being like a mother. Just part of the image that comes to me with that is, a mother carrying a baby inside is like having to deal with all of those movements. Sometimes the baby's sleeping and sometimes the baby's like, and the mother also has to keep growing and shifting and changing, and her whole body keeps shifting and changing as that, baby is preparing itself for birth. And I do feel like it's definitely a process of that. And yeah, it's both practical and like, how a mother has to like make sure she eats right and this and that. And so it's like the space has to be practically maintained in terms of it has to be cleaned, and the rent has to be paid, and the electricity bill has to be paid. And how do I manage all of that, as well as there's also all the ins and outs of the movements of renters, and then my own teaching and presence in this space. And it's quite a holding. Yeah. And I would not be able to do it without all of this movement, and this kind of sacredness of like this bigger holding, like something is holding not just me, but all of us in the holding of this space. And I constantly have to keep feeling into that in different ways, within my own experience, always every day, to stay the course, especially during this last 2.5 years.
But it's a beautiful example of a feminine, this circular idea of this, rather than a hierarchy, I'm the boss, this is my business, and, you can just pay me or whatever. You have this more circular where different people contribute, and people who come in, the renters come in, and they contribute by making money for the space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, like I said, I think it's a beautiful example of how things can be. And the fact that you held it together through this period of time is wonderful. And again, it shows how much you love it. I mean, that no one's going to do that. No one's going to just say, okay, we'll get through this somehow. No, there has to be some, there has to be some real connection to the space. And I'm sure that comes through in all the people that use the space, that there's a part of you that's holding that all together. So I'm excited to see the space. I will definitely make the trip to the city the next time I go to the States and
Please do. Please do. I'd
check
love
it
to have
out.
you come be there with me and us.
Yeah. No, that would be wonderful. So we've been talking for an hour now, so maybe I should jump into if people want to get in touch with you, or maybe first tell us of anything that's coming up for you, if you're doing classes or what's going on these days as far as what you're teaching.
Well, as things are still sort of feeling their way out out from COVID or in from COVID, my teaching's still all offered online, with the option for my in-person classes. Some people do come in person on occasion, but I'm still teaching online, so we're doing that dance. And if you go to my website right now, all you'll get is weekly class information. Admittedly, as I'm running the studio on all aspects and running all of my teaching, I haven't gotten to that point this year where I've put workshops on but having said that, I just in these last couple of weeks, I'm like, okay, now I've got to start making those choices. So for all of you listening, please keep revisiting my website or be in touch with me at my email, mary@movingbodyresources.com, because I am going to be adding dates for some online workshops, and I'm also dreaming of at least a couple in-person options this year. Hopefully they can happen. They happen if they do. They happen if we all feel safe enough. So there's that. I am teaching. I'm just doing a day-long small group in Philadelphia coming up at the end of this month. Basically, a sort of study group for a day. I'm looking forward to that with my colleague and former MA student Lee Fogel. I will be teaching again in Berlin on the Somatic Academy of Berlin's Continuum training, which my understanding is those modules are set up. You can also just attend a module if that's all you want to do, or if you want to attend and become part of the full training, that's an option too. But checking out the Somatic Academy of Berlin when those dates are set up, we're just in the process of discussing what those would be. But right now, it's private sessions, and my 2 regular weekly moving body innovations classes, my All About Attention class, which happens most Fridays, and some online workshops coming up in the near future. It's just like with everything COVID related, and it's like more and more like it's been a little harder for me to plan beyond the next month or 2. But I'm at that point now where I'm ready. Yeah. So.
It has taught us that.
Yeah.
You can't always plan. Yeah. Be dynamic. Learn to be dynamic. So yes. So if you want to get in touch with Mary or see what's going on, her website is www.movingbodyresources.com and www.maryabrams.com. So you can find more information there. And thank you. Thank you for being with us today and sharing your experiences and your center and everything that you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Leslie. This has been such a blessing, and I just can't wait to talk to you and everybody else more.
All right. Thank you, Mary.
Keep moving.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, thank you for those of you who attended live and who are watching the replay. Please comment. If you have questions, you can leave them in the comments and we will definitely get back to you. And I do want to invite people to join me on Facebook. I have a group, the Alchemy of Dance Community, and it's a place for anyone who's interested in sacred dance or conscious dance. You can join us there. So I want to also let you know who's coming up in the next month. So we're going to have another beautiful guest, Amara Pagano, who is the co-founder of One Dance Tribe and the creator of the Path of Azul. So be with us next month when she's here. And I just want to thank everyone for being here and listening in. And I hope you are on a beautiful dance journey. And if you haven't started your dance journey yet, check out Mary's work, check out some of the other podcasts that we've done. There's a list, and there's a lot of beautiful people doing a lot of wonderful work. So please do try, and a lot of online options these days. So it's a good opportunity to discover new types of movement and new processes and to help you on your journey. All right, so I'm going to leave you for now. And as I said, please like and subscribe so that other people can also find these videos. All right, thank you for being here. Bye-bye.